Hi, I'm Karen. Welcome to my channel. If you're a crafter, you may be familiar with the technique called decoupage. Today, I'm going to show you my take on decoupage using different materials for jewelry making. I call it epoxy decoupage. Let's go get started. This is a piece of the tissue paper from Tim Holtz. These work really well, especially with the white background of the epoxy clay. Now here is actually a rice paper by Stamperia. This is what I'm going to use on my examples for today. The paper is absolutely gorgeous and it does have these fibers in it like a handmade paper. These are my bezels I'm going to be using today, and I did cut out a rough shape of the papers for each one. This is the two-part epoxy clay that I use. It's actually Cerulean, which is a product made by Swarovski. There's a hardener and the actual colored one. The hardener is the same no matter what color you buy. For this project, I always prefer white because I feel like it makes the papers really show up better, and it makes them almost look more like a cabochon when they're done. To use this, you take and cut an equal part of the colored one and the hardener. Be sure that they're equal, and if they're not, it will not cure correctly. With your equal parts of the hardener and the colored clay, you mix them together really well until it's all one color. If there's any striations at all in there, it will not cure properly because it's not been correctly mixed. So I might actually have too much of the clay mixed up here, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch off a piece of clay, put it in the bezel, and then I'll be laying my paper over top. The main thing you want to do when you are doing this is be sure you have enough clay, but not too much. And you don't want it to stick up very far up over the edge of the bezel. I just use my finger and I press it down in there. I will sometimes actually roll my finger over top the very top to try to smooth it out somewhat. For this project, it doesn't really matter if you have fingerprints on the top because your paper will cover it. But you want to be sure that it is pretty even so that there's no dimples or dents or humps in your finished product. So I do go ahead and apply my paper to the top. Very gently try to smooth out any wrinkles, bubbles, whatever. It will cure and my paper will be permanently adhered, and the whole thing will be permanently adhered to the bezel. I do try to trim off a little bit of the excess paper, and then before I do the very finishing touches to the project, I will go ahead and trim off any excess with my X-Acto knife. The working time for the epoxy clay is about 30 to 45 minutes. So if you have any extra, you do want to go ahead and use it as quickly as possible before it starts to cure and harden. I will end up having extra here, so I'll see what I can make with that. Here I'm actually pushing it down on my Teflon sheet trying to even out the top. It didn't work very well on this, but you also do want to be sure that any overflow on the outside edge of the bezel that you scrape off, because once it cures, you will not be able to remove it. These will now all sit and cure for 24 hours before we do anything else with them. So here I have my regular epoxy mixed up, and it is a epoxy that will take a full 24 hours to cure. With my little spatula / brush, I'm applying it very carefully in a thin layer. I will go back and add just a little bit more to be sure that it's smooth on top, just by kind of making a few drops of epoxy onto it and letting it self-level. I'll do this with each of my bezels, and I will have to let it cure for a full 24 hours. You also want to be careful that you don't put too much on, because if it runs over with these ornate type of bezels, it is very hard to clean up. You can attempt with a baby wipe right away, but it can get in the little holes and actually cure and harden there and be very difficult to remove. So I did end up making a fourth one with my leftover epoxy clay, and as you can see, the 3 on the right I did end up sanding down a little bit so they weren't so shiny. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe.